Welcome to Cosmopolitics. I'm Elise Labott, and I'm here with my dear longtime friend, Aaron David Miller, who, if you know anything about Mideast peace or the Israeli-Palestinian issue, you'll know that Aaron is one of the most well-known longtime peace negotiators who worked for, what is it, 4 presidents, 5 presidents, Aaron?
Secretaries of State, but thanks, Elise. Too kind.
I think it's 7 secretaries of state, but
that makes me older than I am.
Certainly, many presidents and many secretaries of state and many iterations of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And
Sadly,
more importantly, this is Aaron's first Substack Live.
showing my age.
I am trying to, that's why we're a few minutes late. I'm trying to let him know about the glory of Substack, and we're hoping that he will be a new contributor. You can find him at Aaron David Miller 1, and we'll share all the show notes, and we'll send you out his handle. And you'll see, Aaron, you'll see, come into the light, come into the light.
Right. My kids tell me I fall farther and farther behind every day. I know that's the case.
Well, anyway, welcome. We're really glad you're here to break down what happened yesterday with the peace plan. And you and I were talking yesterday because you've worked again with several presidents and secretaries of state, and in an ordinary kind of situation where a president writes out a detailed peace plan and tries to sell it, you'd have kind of you'd want to go with that, a boy, like finally someone's getting ready and going for it. But when you put it into the context of everything else is going on in the country and in the region, it's really hard to kind of be as full throttled about the effort that it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's Trumpian in so many respects. The Arabs urged him not to put it out in writing when they learned fundamentally that the Israelis had edited the plan, which I might add is not unusual. At Camp David, which was the last serious effort to solve the Israeli-Palestinian problem, on the 4th day of that summit, I saw Saab Erekat walking on one of the paths at Camp David. He said, "Where's the U.S. document?" I said, "Well, we're still working on it, Saab." He looked at me, laughed, and he said, "You've given it to the Israelis first, haven't you?" Of course, he knew, I knew. I just kept on walking. And the fact is that summit came to an end, lasted 13 days, but it came to an end on that 4th day when we, in fact, abandoned any pretense to play the role of an effective sort of mediator. And the same thing happened with Trump. Dermer and Witkoff got together on Saturday with maybe Jared Kushner was there.
Jared's back. Jared is back. Anybody that says that Jared's not doing it anymore, I almost kind of feel like Steve may be the face of it, but Jared is the brains of it.
Yeah. At any rate, they added a point or two, and when they briefed the Emiratis and the Qataris, who briefed Hamas based on the old document, they're furious. And now Hamas.
What were the points that the Israelis
Well, it was
added?
one central point that Israeli withdrawal will be tied to Palestinian compliance with respect to demilitarization and decommissioning of weapons, which essentially gives the Israelis, from their point of view, understandably, all sorts of off-ramps to stay in Gaza until they're fundamentally certain that Hamas is not only militarily disarmed, although that's also made clear in the plan, that it has no role in governance. So the fact is, Elise, we're left on today's Tuesday, we're left with what is likely to be 2 yes buts. Hamas will not reject this, but they'll come back with a yes but, and then it'll be up to Trump to decide whether or not that's a no, or whether or not the Middle East souk is open for more negotiations. I cannot believe there's never been a peace plan in the history of the world that we were responsible for in which the parties basically accepted it cleanly.
Well, you said yourself yesterday, like each of the points itself is ridden with landmines and kind of contradictory positions, and they're going to haggle over every comma.
I think so. No maps, no timetables, no withdrawal schedules. Each point
there's a timetable for the release of the hostages,
exactly,
but for nothing else.
Right. And that's, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, the reason Trump succeeded where Biden had failed in getting a public endorsement by the prime minister.
Yeah, let's talk
is
about
because Netanyahu is thinking now about running again, re-election, either in the spring of 26, or if the government goes to term in October of 2026. And Donald Trump is absolutely elemental and critical to his re-election effort. So that's one reason Netanyahu had to fall in line. The other is that if you look at this plan, the Americans front-loaded it with so many pro-Israeli elements that it's no wonder it was an easier pill. Not a great one. Netanyahu would have preferred there be no plan, but he has one. As you pointed out, at least 72 hours after cessation of hostilities, all of the hostages are released. The Israelis get to stay in Gaza until the decommissioning, demilitarization process is complete. There is a reference to Palestinian statehood in the penultimate clause, I think, of the points. But that's an idea, frankly, that's tethered to a galaxy far, far away. It makes no sense, frankly, with respect to the realities back here on planet Earth. So this is a very pro-Israeli document, which is the other reason Netanyahu could essentially accept it.
Couple of things. First of all, you said Netanyahu would prefer not to get a deal. Let's talk about the hostages. I mean, the hostage family said it's a turning point. It's a good, they are having hope that their families will be released. Does Netanyahu really think that, continuing this offensive in Gaza City, that they'll find the hostages, or he just doesn't, give a damn?
I mean, the IDF, Yal Zamir, chief of staff, I think, has said publicly that, in fact, Israeli operations in Gaza City is likely to jeopardize an already fraught situation for the 21, 22, 20.
Yeah, there was about 20. I saw a very senior Israeli official last week in New York, and this person told, a small group of reporters, they think they're 20, maybe 21, and about 28 killed hostage, corpses, and that they think they know, they have a general idea where they are.
Right. And you remember what happened last August when Israelis were close to positions, tunnels, or shafts where the hostages were being kept.
Right.
Hamas had orders, presumably, to kill if the Israelis came closer, and they executed 6 hostages.
Right.
Including an American citizen. Look, it's been my view all along. I'm not an Israeli, and I don't play one on TV, but Netanyahu has decided to avenge the dead rather than to redeem
save the rest,
rather than to redeem the living. And I think the polls strongly suggest that most Israelis fundamentally disagree with that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, because it seems as if the trauma that the Israelis are going through right now is more related to the fact that the hostages are still in captivity than the security issues themselves and the fact that they want to destroy Hamas.
Oh, I think that's absolutely the case. And I think the IDF would also accept something well short of total victory.
There was that report that said that this has not been, executed well, that there's no political end game. I mean, military generals and the IDF and the whole national security community in Israel really seems to think like, the law of diminishing returns has well been passed.
I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I played this thought experiment in my head ever since October 7th. Had you placed a Rabin, a Barak, an Omer, a Sharon, a Ben Gurion in power on October 7th, I think the Israeli response would have been more or less the same. But 6, 8, 10 months into the war, any of these prime ministers would have understood that military power had to become a means to an end, to convert into realistic, feasible, and sustainable end states. And that was not the case here. This is the only prime minister in the history of the Israeli state who is on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in a Jerusalem district court 4 years running. he must maintain himself in power in either to beat the indictment or to avoid a conviction, which would basically mean a plea deal, which would drive him out of politics. So this is an unusual prime minister, the longest governing prime minister in Israel's history. And with elections probably spring of 2026, it's not unthinkable. I hate double negatives, but it's not unthinkable that he could win again.
How is that even possible? If he's got is it because of his coalition, or is it because that Israelis don't have an alternative?
I think it's that and that, plus the nature of the Israeli political system. Likud today is the most coherent, cohesive political force, other than protesters in the streets, of course, over a prolonged period of time in the hundreds of thousands. Likud is the most stable political entity in Israeli politics today. Likud does not have a history of devouring its own. Begin was not forced out. He chose to leave. And I don't think that it's a question of finding a new Likud leader. I think that all you need is 60 plus one to govern. Netanyahu now is a minority government, because the religious parties have left. How he handles the two extremist right-wing ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, unclear to me. But all of it suggests to me, and it takes 3 months, right, between the dissolution of the Knesset at a minimum to call for to actually schedule new elections. If Netanyahu scheduled new elections for November, it would be January, February before they were held. And I think that that is conceivable.
Unbelievable. You mentioned Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. So let's talk about how they perceive the plan. I mean, yesterday they weren't kind of lining up to, praise it. And, when and this call with the Qatari prime minister, the emir.
Right. The apology.
The apology. What did he do it at the barrel of a gun? I think Trump just picked up the phone and said, "This is what we're doing." I mean,
yeah.
Right?
One Israeli wag said that Yom Kippur had come early. Clearly, and again, the tick-tock on what exactly the president knew and when he knew it is not done.
Yeah.
I fail to believe that Benjamin Netanyahu, even in his risk-ready state, would have dared strike Doha without at least a blinking yellow light from Donald Trump. So he apologized. Wasn't a great day for Netanyahu in Israeli politics. Look, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich were riding.
You saw what they said after, right? That, this was a just thing that we did. And,
right. But now the plan looks a little different. And Smotrich, I think, understands that Netanyahu may well be considering abandoning them if necessary. The plan.
How does he do that and hold on to?
Well, Gantz and Lapid have already said.
Oh, yeah, they said they would support him if
that they would provide a safety net, although none of them trust him. They were on a roll for a while. You had the Gaza Riviera plan, in which Trump it's essentially intimated that all Palestinians should leave.
And they'll develop it, and him and
exactly.
Netanyahu will eat hummus on the beach together.
Right. And now you have a situation where Trump is flipped completely and has said there'll be no Israeli occupation of Gaza, no Israeli annexation of Gaza, no forced migration of Gazans. In fact, Gazans can leave and then come back. So the Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are feeling not great. And by the way, no annexation
of the West Bank.
Right. And somebody said to me today, well, Trump has been incredibly tough with Netanyahu on this issue. And, the reality is Trump came in and reversed whatever Joe Biden tried to do, sanctioning settlers and entities, rhetorically criticizing Israeli settlement activity. Trump has essentially acquiesced in a de facto annexationist policy. So I don't think that, and not even Netanyahu would annex without Trump's approval.
Well, and also, what Trump has done with this plan is kind of make, this contingent upon all the things Hamas has to do. And by doing that, he's almost kind of giving Netanyahu license to continue the war unless Hamas turns into, I don't know, Mary Poppins and her the band of Mary.
Right. I mean, somebody asked me, well, I mean, isn't this an example of imposed pressure? You've got international involvement now, you've got Tony Blair involved, all that. I said, no. The reality is, you heard Trump. If Hamas doesn't say yes or provide perhaps a reasonable yes, but then, well, the forces of hell will rain down a fire.
So, yeah, let's look at the plan. Okay, if both sides to agree to the proposal, the war will immediately end. Israeli forces will withdraw to the agreed upon line to prepare for the hostage release. I mean, the war will not immediately end if Israel is still there.
There's no, again, no timelines, no maps, no timetables for withdrawal. The number of Palestinian prisoners, frankly, I would have argued is on the low end. Hamas may want to inflate those. The 1,700, that's an easy lift for Netanyahu. The IDF picked them up on October 7th. The 250 or 200 who are accused of killing Israelis, that's a tougher lift. I would have thought Hamas wanted more, and they probably will want more. So I think we're on the verge of a decision as to whether to accept changes, a negotiation, or maybe Trump, as he did with you. This reminds me, and you wrote about this, of Anchorage. You have an event.
With Alaska, where President Trump and Putin came out and pizza for everybody. We have an agreement. They didn't take questions because it masked over all of the disagreements on the fine print, and then it kind of fell apart.
Right, and then you schedule a bilateral and a trilateral and a process, and none of it ever happened. Whether that could be the fate of this plan, a lot of stakeholders. I think this.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I have a feeling this will last for a while, and I wouldn't rule out if Trump actually took this seriously. After all, he appointed himself
as chairman of the board of the Board of Peace,
head of the Peace Board, which might suggest that he actually owns this. But again, there is nothing that he has done that he is not able to walk away from. And that may well be the fate of this plan.
Well, I mean, you heard him say, I've solved 7, 8, 9 wars. He obviously wants his Nobel Peace Prize. And I've said, and I think, several people have said, look, if he solves Ukraine, give it to him. I mean, but is this him really owning it? Or is this doing what he did with the other, 6 or 7 conflicts, calling it a win, but it's not really a win?
I mean, I think that's right. And Tony Blair clearly was the only human he mentioned in relationship to the Peace Board. Blair is committed. But let's be very clear about one thing. There are 2 humans, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and maybe the brigade commander, Izzadin al-Haddad, who is making decisions now that the senior leadership of Hamas has been essentially removed forcibly by the Israelis, killed. And the external leadership has to be very careful now about their movements, since the Israelis will kill them all eventually, no matter how long it takes. It's up to Trump, Netanyahu, and whoever is making decisions internally for Hamas. The fate of this initiative is in the hands of those 3. And it seems to me, unless they are each prepared to really own this thing, there's no way this is going to work. It's going to crater. And I don't have a sense from any of them, certainly not from Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu, that they really own this thing.
If you just joined us, I'm Elise Labott with Cosmopolitics. I'm here with Aaron David Miller of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, longtime US peace negotiator. If you have questions, please put them in the comments. Trudy asks, isn't Israel an autocracy?
In other words, an autocracy, an authoritarian country like China, Iran, North Korea, and
Yeah. Not I
and
would
Putin.
say I would say, and I think we're facing something like this here in the States. Everyone's saying this is authoritarian, this is, fascist. I think we're at the point of right now, like in a liberal democracy.
I mean, you
And
could,
maybe Israel is the same thing, right? He's doing all these things to keep himself in power and work around the courts and everything, but not necessarily following the will of the people.
yeah, yeah. I mean, again, the rules of the game in Israel, you need 60 plus one. No, I mean, I think he won a fair and free election. He put together a coalition. It's the most right wing and extremist coalition in the history of the state of Israel, but it is a legitimate government uh, supported by enough voters and by the realities of Knesset arithmetic that the religious Zionists and the ultra Orthodox and Likud are a much more natural fit in a coalition than trying to put together a wall-to-wall left of center to right of center coalition, which is what you had under Bennett and Lapid. So no, I don't think Israel is an authoritarian power. I don't think it's an autocracy. You have hundreds of thousands of people out in the streets week after week, 400,000 several weeks ago. That's roughly equivalent to 15 million Americans. I find it, there's no doubt that the value proposition of the state of Israel has been undermined, to say the least. And the Israeli brand, I don't believe in the end. I wrote a book called The End of Greatness, Why American Can't Have and Doesn't Want Another Great President. I just had a session with Ian Bremmer, who wrote a book on 15 years ago on the end of the free markets. Frank Fukuyama wrote a book on the end of history. And it's hard to declare the end of anything. And I just make a personal comment. I mean, I'm 76 years old. I have kids and grandkids. I can't see what's in front of me for good or ill. Apartheid never should have ended the way it did. No one would have predicted a de Klerk and a Mandela. No one. It might have ended, but it might have ended bloodily. It didn't. So when we talk about the end of Israel's brand, and I explored this issue with Ian Bremmer, it's hard to make that kind of prediction in the out years. What you can say, and I would define an American ally as a country, and it's a very specific term, apart from treaty obligations. And Israel is not a treaty ally of the United States, as Japan is, as South Korea is, as the Philippines are. But to be an ally of the United States, you need three things. You need a high coincidence of interest, not a strict coincidence, but a high coincidence. You need a confluence of values, and you need a strong base of domestic support. I think a case can be made that all three of these elements are under great stress.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. So sometimes the interests and values and support align.
Right.
Sometimes two of them align.
Right.
With what Israel's doing right now, and Trump even said it himself, that he doesn't think that continuing some of these things that Netanyahu is doing is in the best interest of the United States. One could argue that Netanyahu and Trump have similar values now, but do the United States and Israel have similar values? Maybe their people do, but certainly their leaders do. And I think domestic support, obviously on the left, but also on the right, is waning.
I mean, look at the three Chris's, Van Hollen, Murphy, and Coons. All of them in the last 18 months have called for a condition or restricted policy of U.S. military supplies to Israel.
Would you, if you were in government right now, would you recommend that?
Would I recommend conditioning or restricting U.S. military assistance to Israel? I think given what we've seen over the course of the last year and a half, now that the Israelis have what I call escalation dominance, which is something that they have never had in the 77 years of the state's existence, which is the capacity to control the intensity, the focus and the pace of their military activities against their principal adversaries to escalate when and where they choose, and to block escalation from any of their adversaries? The answer is I probably would. I probably would.
And you're a very strong you're a very strong supporter of Israel. So when we say, and as am I, but I feel like sometimes, and I want to talk about this as well, I feel like, criticism of Israel has been conflated with whether you're anti-Semite, and we're both Jewish, anti-Semitic. It's like you can't criticize Israel or you're anti-Israel.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that I would argue, and the Jewish community in this country is a very complicated place, right? I mean, very complicated, and I try not to talk about it because it basically gives me a headache. I mean, when I was working, I mean, the worst criticisms we got, and there were 4 Jews working for Jim Baker, and you can imagine, they didn't have email in, you could imagine the letters, but the worst criticism was from right-wing Israelis and right-wing American Jews against Baker's staff.
If you don't give Israel a green light, you're anti-Israel.
Right. So the Jewish community today is genuinely, I think, caught between October 7 on one hand and the legitimate rise, the very real rise of anti-Semitism in America. And
do you think it's being conflated? Because when I remember when we were, when I was covering the State Department and you were there, you would hear criticism of Israel and you would have anti-Semitism. But the people that were criticizing Israeli policies were not talking about Jews. They were talking specifically, and Arabs too, talking specifically about policies. But I feel like in the last, certainly since October 7th, I feel like Jews have just been tarred with October 7th, and what's going on in Gaza is the fault of the Jews.
I mean, I think that's right. And you look at what happened in 2023 on quite a few college and university campuses across the country. I mean, we occupied Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years. We killed thousands of Iraqis, thousands of Afghans. And yet during that entire period, I couldn't point to a period of time in which any college campus demonstrated the concern, the outrage. And
what do you think that's about?
I think
social media?
I think that's certainly the force multiplier, but I think it's all tied up with intersectionality.
Yeah.
It's all tied up with Black Lives Matter. It's all tied up with,
I agree so much. Intersectionality, like social justice.
Right. I mean, I gave 3 or 4 talks during that period, and I was rivered to the seed several times. And I remember talking to one student who said, "Do you know what the most vibrant force ideology is on this campus?" It was a very prestigious East Coast college, excuse me. I said, "No, anti-colonialism. It's all tied up with the asymmetry of power, with the notion that Israel is a colonial settler state."
Right. A settler colonialism.
And now it's conflated, and it's exceedingly dangerous and worrisome. I think, and I'll speak personally here. I think that between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, they are making Jews less, not more secure.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very, very serious problem. And you see how anti-Semitism is being instrumentalized and weaponized.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I do as well. And it's being weaponized, but it's interesting how it's being weaponized. Like, I want to talk about Israel's wider isolation. And if you've just joined us, I'm Elise Labott of Cosmopolitics. I'm here with my dear longtime friend Aaron David Miller, longtime US peace negotiator, Mideast peace negotiator, and now at Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. You can read him in Foreign Policy, Politico, and I'm trying to get, this is his first Substack Live. We're going to get him on writing on Substack very soon, and he'll be back here. And we started a little bit late because this is Aaron's first live, and we had some technical difficulties. So we're going to go a little past the typical
Aaron,
half hour.
Those
Aaron's old.
Yeah, no, those technical difficulties. Yeah, thank you, Elise, for covering that one up.
So let's talk about Israel's wider isolation and what you thought when you saw what was going on at the United Nations, the recognition of a Palestinian state by so many countries. And, obviously it's symbolic. What did you think of that?
I mean, look, I describe this as what I think the paradox of Palestine. And it's a question I cannot answer. I'll put it out there for you and everyone who's watching and listening. We're now about to enter the third year of this war. And the 3 or 4 power centers, let's leave the Chinese and the Russians out of it, because on this, they're more or less, frankly, they're not really relevant. Of the 3 or 4 power centers that were capable of imposing serious costs and consequences on these two combatants, Hamas and Israel, but particularly on the Israelis, look what we've seen. The 3 European states that Israel cares most about, the Brits, the French, and the Germans, have failed to impose a single cost or consequence on the Netanyahu government that normal humans would regard as significant, serious pressure. The Germans imposed a partial arms embargo while they're buying $4 billion in aero defense systems from the Israelis. The Arab states, Israel's treaty partners, Egypt and Jordan,
and the Abraham Accords partners have not done a damn thing.
The Bahrainis and the Emiratis, the 2 of the Abraham Accord countries that have formal diplomatic relations with Israel, have done nothing. And the Biden administration and now the Trump administration, again, failed to impose a single. So at a time when you would have thought the moment for Palestinian statehood, for the urgency of resolving the Palestinian issue, would have been as salient and as resonant and as universally seized. Yes, performative, virtue signaling, civil society, Spain, France, Israelis are uncomfortable where they travel, Eurovision, all of that is demonstrating outrage. But in terms of the power centers, has any country severed relations with the state of Israel? No. Has any country imposed sanctions? The Brits have spent
the European Union is talking about it now.
Yes, but I think the operative phrase is the European Union is talking about it. And the EU is Israel's largest trading partner.
Right.
So how do you reconcile that? Israel is not a pariah nation. It is accepted, and even though it in its efforts to prosecute Hamas in an effort to counter that fateful 48 hours where Hamas essentially engaged in indiscriminate killing of men, women, and children, mutilation, sexual predation, raping, the taking of hostages, the murder of hostages. In an effort to prosecute that war, Israel has killed scores of thousands of Palestinians, mostly civilians, has transferred the margin of deaths, civilian deaths, they are prepared to accept in an effort to strike military targets, has not taken the issue of humanitarian assistance and not turned it into a strategy, which is the essence of counterinsurgency. If you want to build an alternative to Hamas, you don't use food as a weapon.
All right, well, we've talked about this, and I think you got to give credit to President Bush, who did push for reforms. There was the whole Annapolis process, those type of things. What I feel is happening, though, is with this recognition, it's not that they really think they're giving the Palestinians a state. It's like exhaustion from the international community, and this is the only thing that they feel they can do. So This is retaliation for the war in Gaza. And then the Israelis are saying, well, we're going to annex the West Bank in retaliation for your recognition for retaliation for the war in Gaza. I mean, I feel like they're using the Palestinians' self-determination as a weapon against each other, and it's not helping. It's not going to feed starving children. It's not going to open up hospitals. It's not giving them any land. It's not giving them any rights in any way, shape, or form.
I mean,
look, I do think the Palestinians deserve a state, a secure, peaceful state living side by side with Israel. I thought this was the kabuki dance.
It was. And I think, again, that the only useful deployment of the phrase river to the sea, as far as I'm concerned, is what to do with the 15 or 16 million humans that reside between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River. Israel is a country just shy of 10 million people, 2 million Palestinian citizens of Israel. They have a separate problem with social and economic discrimination against their own citizens. And then you have the separate problem of 6 million Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. That is the central question. And I was at the only effort by an American president, an empowered PLO leader, and an Israeli prime minister who was willing to let's put it this way. Ehud Barak went further than any other Israeli prime minister has ever gone. It was not sufficient for a conflict-ending agreement. But that was 25 years ago. And the gaps on the 5 core issues, border security, Jerusalem, refugees, recognition of end of all claims and conflict.
Right.
Were as wide as the Grand Canyon. Today, they're galactic, right? So you can try to construct a bridge by ending the war in Gaza and creating an alternative pathway for Israelis and Palestinians to find a way to begin to re-engage. But it won't happen quickly. And while I continue to believe that separation through negotiation in 2 states is the only solution that answers all of the outstanding questions, October 7th have persuaded me that Israelis and Palestinians cannot live together happily ever after under one roof. They need to separate. So we may have new concepts of sovereignty. I don't know what the future holds. But recognizing Palestinian statehood now, I think, is ill-advised, ill-timed, and is a very poor substitute for what you just suggested, which should have been a forceful effort on the part of the Arab states and the Europeans and Washington to, at a minimum, alleviate the humanitarian catastrophe. Call it what you want: food insecurity, starvation, famine. It's a horror show. And once,
yeah, I mean,
and once the
like
one more thing.
They're parsing. Yeah, go ahead.
Once the press is permitted to enter Gaza, once that happens, the horrors are going to be magnified 1,000-fold. Once the stories are told by Palestinians, literally talking directly to Western reporters. So, I mean, that's where I think the recognition issue doesn't add up.
It's tone deaf.
It's performative, and
it's
it
like
doesn't.
A paper lifeboat.
Right. It does not. And I understand why Palestinians may be seized with the moment.
I don't think any, you read Palestinians, they're like, again, like what is, this isn't going to feed my dying children,
right,
or my starving children. And then I think we're going to close in a few minutes. If you have any last questions, put them in the chat. I do think this kind of also, I do agree that in a way, tying it to this whole war in Gaza does, reward Hamas in a way. And then also it kind of gives the Palestinians, lets them off the hook about the governance issues that they have refused to deal with. I mean, for Abbas to address the UN and say, we're ready to take over Gaza is,
right,
Looney Tune.
Yeah, but think about this. Ahmed Shara, the former head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a derivative of Al-Qaeda in Syria, is invited to New York The president has already met him twice. His foreign minister was here in Washington, facilitated by the Trump administration to remove the Caesar sanctions. And yet Mahmoud Abbas has to appear by video.
Oh, I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
It just shows you where the focus of the Trump administration is. It's an interstate conflict, and it needs to be resolved by focusing on Israel's relations with states. Way back in 2018, Jared Kushner asked to see me. We had a nice conversation. I said, let's talk about history. You might be interested. I'm not interested in that. Let me just tell you where my father-in-law is. Number one, he's going to make it impossible for an Israeli prime minister to want to say no to him. Number two, he's going to develop strategic relations with key Gulf states, the Emiratis and the Saudis. And number three, the Palestinians don't understand something. They're the weakest parties. They're going to get very little. And those three priorities figure prominently today.
Right.
Today.
I want to close on one last thing. If you look at what happened a couple weeks ago, the Arab League Islamic State meeting, where all of the Arab states and all of the Islamic states met together to talk about the war and supposedly talk about the war in Gaza. So you have all the Arab states, all the Abraham Accord states, Turkey, Qatar, Iran. And Iran was never in those meetings, because Iran was the boogeyman. And this time, all of those countries were together, and Israel is the boogeyman. Israel is seen as the dominant power and the dominant threat in the Middle East. And I just think, they have, to their credit, reshaped, and you and I have talked about this for the last 2 years, reshaped the region in terms of, defanged Hamas, defanged Hezbollah, helped get rid of Bashar al-Assad. You bombed Iran with the United States. They've changed the battlefield for their own security, but also I think for others' security. And, it used to be that Israel would say, well, yeah, you want to be with a winner. But right now, those countries don't see Israel as the winner. They see Israel as a threat.
Right. And in the hands of a prime minister that had a strategy and had vision and purpose, translating what the Israelis now have, escalation dominance,
into goodwill,
or even into durable political arrangements, or creating the beginnings of pathways to achieve them, Benjamin Netanyahu could have gone down as the greatest prime minister in the history of the state of Israel. I have now defeated all of our enemies, and now I extend my hand in friendship
to Iran.
I mean, you heard Trump yesterday talk about, he included Iran. Maybe Iran will be a part of this moment in world civilization with Israel.
Right.
But no rewind buttons on history, at least about. And listen, as my first exposure to Substack, you made it a wonderful experience. By the way, at least you're really, really good at this. No. You're really, really good.
Thank you.
And if I could figure out the technology, I'll do it again. I'll be I'll be back.
All right. Well,
one advertisement. I run an interview show at Carnegie called Carnegie Connects.
You should definitely check it out. He's going to I'm going to teach him how to put it on Substack.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll help. I'll send all his information in the show notes. One other programming note. I know everyone was watching the Lollapalooza meeting at Quantico today. Just lastly, what did you think of that?
I mean, what can I say? I think more important, what did the 800 invitees?
Wouldn't it be great if there were thought bubbles coming out?
Once they got over the fact that a number of them weren't going to be fired, they have to be rolling their eyes and shaking their heads. These people need to be lectured by Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump about what it means to sacrifice for America. Now, we have a president, unfortunately, who is incapable of turning the M in me upside down, so it becomes a W in we. And he's basically the founders believed in two basic principles for effective governance. One is moral self-governance, the capacity of a human to subordinate their own needs, ambitions, and control their demons in pursuit of the second, which is public virtue. That doesn't exist here.
Yeah. It was,
Sorry,
and I mean,
sorry to end
on this note.
Oh,
Well,
Annalise,
actually,
let me wish you an easy fast.
oh yeah. Well, I don't have any sins. The only sin I really have is I might take like one of the chicken nuggets out of the salad bar at Whole Foods and not pay for it because I bought other ones. But anyway, tomorrow I will be joined by Barbara Starr, former longtime CNN Pentagon correspondent who's already been a guest on Cosmopolitics, and we'll be breaking it down. So I hope you'll join us.
She's
Aaron,
wonderful.
Thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you,
definitely
Elise.
love for you to come back.
Will do. Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Have an easy fast for all those celebrating. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.